Hey recappers, Ellis here. The machines are making art now, arranging songs, painting, algorithm on canvas, writing poetry, building games and virtual worlds, terrifying Hollywood. McConaughey trademarked his whole entire being. Look it up. Now, depending on who you ask, this is all either the most exciting development in the history of human creativity or a quiet catastrophe for it. Most people have a strong opinion. Very few have actually studied the question. Well, today's guest has spent her career doing exactly that. Dr. Maya Ackerman is a computer scientist, computational creativity researcher, and the author of Creative Machines, AI, Art, and Us, published last fall, which traces the multi-decade arc of creative AI, a distinct blend of psychology, artistry, and personal experience. It details how AI can amplify our brilliance and expose our blind spots. So enjoy Dr. Maya Ackerman, and thank you for hitting that like button, even if you had your AI agent do it. Maya, welcome to the Recap Podcast.
So great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure and a half. I'd love to begin with your book, released fall of last year, if my homework is correct, Creative Machines, AI, Art, and Us. It's really this engrossing timeline and analysis of creative AI, be it in music, art, just imagination in the purest sense. I'm curious, along the meteoric rise in creative AI, what are two watershed moments that most people wouldn't know?
Oh, there are so many. Just two. So, perhaps the most notable early moment was in the 1980s when Harold Cohen created a system called Aaron.
You beat me to it.
Yeah, it was making art in his style specifically. He taught his AI to draw in his style. He was a very well-known artist at the time. And then people started to say that his AI is creative. And that actually really, really upset him. And I got to watch him on stage, kind of like filled with rage. People were calling my system creative. And I was the only voice of reason saying that I was a creative one. And that was the moment in 2015 that converted me to study generative AI. So that's one, but you asked me for two. Another amazing early system is called Amy, Experiments in Musical Intelligence by David Cope, who passed away relatively recently. And he started his amazing musical system that made music in the style of Bach, Vivaldi, and all the greats back in the 70s. And only very, very recently, these large, data-based systems started to surpass the quality of this 1970s machine.
Absolutely. I'd love to circle back because actually I had a question specifically about Aaron and Harold Cohen. But coming back to that, you saw him on stage in 2015, you said, right? So if we break down Aaron, that was at the Stanford lab, is that right? Where he initiated this?
Yes, yeah, he did start in the Stanford lab.
And essentially a painting machine, right? Did you know about this before you saw him on stage, or did you hear tell of this appearance, went and saw him on stage, and then grew captivated by all he had done?
It was an incredibly live moment for me. I was attending information theory and applications, and I've been doing AI kind of my entire education. I was the first-year professor. So I'm in the space for about maybe 8-9 years at the time. And generative AI is this teeny tiny thing, like even as a researcher in AI with a PhD in AI, as a professor, I had no idea that machines were generating stuff, just like most people out in the world had no idea. And I'm kind of going through this little career crisis. I got somehow, the love I felt for foundations of cluster analysis, which I did my PhD in, was sort of waning, and I'm walking around the conference, half not wanting to be there, like really kind of not a pleasant moment in my life. And then I noticed on the program, there's like a little section saying computational creativity, like creativity. I did a lot of opera singing on the side, always loved the arts. And so I walk into this auditorium having no idea what's about to happen. So I literally met Harold Cohen, having never heard about him, and completely in minutes It was like falling in love with the research field. It was surreal.
It was instant. Yeah. Something palpable about him. Well, let's just stick with it then. I mean, I had a question I was going to provide context about Aaron, but I'm curious what it reveals given how ahead of its time it was. If there's anything distinct, anything it reveals about creativity that newer systems may be obscure.
Oh, so much. So much to learn from these, if you will, fathers of generative AI. One of the things that he talked about in a lot of his interviews, Harold Cohen, is sort of this relationship with Aaron. And the reason it's named Aaron is after his own Hebrew name. It was sort of a part of his identity. He talked about this interaction, this creating together for a long time. Aaron would draw and Harold would paint in the art. And then in this kind of surreal moment, after Harold Cohen passed away, the system Aaron was hit by a lightning strike. And all we have right now is a replica. So there was this really tender, gentle interrelation between the two and this endless questioning of who is creating that's sort of been lost in this ultra commercialization of Gen AI, where it's the AI is coming in as the God that knows everything and it's here to do stuff instead of us, better than us. And I think we sort of desperately need to pause and explore that relationship and make it easier to engage with these systems more as equals, more as partners, more as philosophers and people who question than as just accepting it as, from above and as a replacement.
We've already talked about two early researchers, pioneers. Your book includes many more. Is there a trait shared by all of them?
I think, there's quite a few things. A lot of the early builders and a lot of my colleagues in computational creativity. So computational creativity has been meeting for about a decade before the rise of Gen AI. So it's a group of researchers. There's about 200 of us. A lot of us are in Europe. A lot of us are artists ourselves. We make music and art to various degrees. We love human creativity. There's a lot of curiosity driving the research. There's a lot of attempts to understand what creativity is, to go beyond typicality. So not just make a song that sounds like it's coming from the radio, or make a piece of art you can hang up on the wall, but can machines make a new kind of genre? Can a machine help a person grieve by helping them draw or write a song? Where it's really about pushing the boundaries and sort of not just commercially kind of extract, but expand what it means to create. So I think in very, very real ways, it's a fundamentally different approach to what we're seeing out in industry right now.
So creative machines, around some really brilliant words around Carl Jung and psychology, subjectively kind of my favorite part of the book, talks about human bias and how AI can expose them. I'm curious if you could describe how, and if you were to rank them, which bias most prominently.
Especially the early systems before they were heavily aligned were this phenomenal mirror into our collective unconscious. It was so honest in a way that humans don't have the capacity to be honest with ourselves, right? Because there's shame around bias, so we don't want to be aware of it. We don't want to be aware of it on a personal level. We don't want to be aware of it on a societal level. Not really, not fully, if we get super honest with ourselves. So for example, in some analysis I did, so I focused on sort of bias against Jewish people and bias against women. Those are the two things that I really delved into in different ways. When it comes to bias against Jews, you would see stuff like, you ask for a sufganya, which is like, Jewish food for Hanukkah, and you get bagels. You get these cool, honestly Indian looking, extra fancy bagels. What? Right? And it's not hateful, it's not stereotypical, but it kind of shows a lack of insight into Jewish culture.
Sure.
And maybe bagels are proportionally important, right? I'm kind of zooming in a little too much on this one example. But the point is that that's what you see, this kind of a focus that's wrong, a lack of insight, simplifying and sometimes really offensive stuff, like a German Christmas tree when you ask for Hanukkah, right? So it varies quite a bit. I don't think you can rank it because it's just bleeding with bias. And here I'm talking about Midjourney because Midjourney is one of the least aligned systems, so it remains one of the most honest and one of the most creative. What's been happening with things like ChatGPT and Gemini is these really, really, really thick alignment layers, which means that instead of honestly showing the bias in the data, the bias in humanity that it's based on, it's sort of showing us the bias as we see it. So the systems are still biased, but now they're biased in a way that's more similar to how society sort of understands its own bias and what it thinks it's right and wrong, right?
It's very meta. Yeah.
It's no longer showing us kind of the truth. It's showing us more like, it's just more similar to the way people think of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more the mirror feature, right? I mean, to bring back to your initial point, did you think this far along, and let's strictly address LLMs, at this juncture now, here in spring 2026, that we'd be further along in that regard, that we'd be, a little more, I don't want to say advanced, but having fixed those errors maybe?
Okay, I have an extremely controversial view here.
Please.
But I think I'm right.
Have at it.
I think that the idea of bias-free AI is absurd, okay? It's, again, in so many ways, we want AI to be God on Earth. We want it to be this all-knowing perfect thing that we're not able to be. But this idea of the perfect bias-free thing is an illusion. Like, I'm not saying that I'm happy with bias in the real world, like so unhappy with it. But you don't fix it with AI.
Mm-hmm.
You don't fix it with AI. You try to mitigate the bias with AI, but the AI is not going to paint some kind of utopia for us, right? That's not realistic. It's also an absurd expectation of companies to show us what our world should be like. So I think any serious effort on bias should gently pull back the bias in AI, very thoughtfully, so we're not introducing more problems than we're solving. But really, bias needs to be solved within humans in the real world, with at least as much effort as we're putting into AI.
So almost you could summarize this saying, whatever bias may or may not be present in AI and LLMs is a symptom, not a cause, right?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. And we should not be turning to these machines as something that shows us the truth, as something that shows us how to live. We need to stop. We need to urgently change how we think about the role of these machines in our lives.
A passage struck me in your book. You wrote, "Machines are now venturing into strange new territories, and we shouldn't try to hold them back." Which counterpoint to that potentially might you respect the most?
In what context did I say that? But around creativity, probably.
Yeah, I do. In the sense of, I guess creative output. We don't have to, if we're talking like legal issues and everything, but we can say on a creative level.
So let's sort of, I appreciate you sort of going hard at that point because I think it's so critical. The way that the world and AI safety has been approaching all of these issues is to say, okay, these companies are doing irresponsible things. They are impacting millions of people. They're not always accurate. Have them be accurate on everything. This does several things. First of all, it makes the systems extremely uncreative. It's almost like we have an expert system that decided what's right and wrong, where humans decided what's right and wrong. And the LLMs are used to provide fluency, to make the language seem, nice and conversational, right? So this gives an unbelievable amount of power to the AI companies and the governments behind them, which, by the way, as we know now, Western governments are also getting involved. It used to be DeepSeek that our government was most relevant. And I'm not saying that per se that that's surprising or even that that's horrible necessarily. What I'm trying to say is that this is who you're giving more power to. Governments and AI companies, by demanding that they tell us the truth. They're going to tell us what they want to tell us, okay? And we need to use our own critical thinking to decide what's right and wrong. And by trying to reduce the amount of critical thinking that we're doing, we're not doing anybody a favor. And at the same time, these systems, as I mentioned briefly, are becoming less and less and less and less and less and less creative. And that's a shame because that's really where they shine. That's really their their natural gift, but they are, I think the most beautiful thing they can give to the world is to help us be more creative.
Let's stick with that on a definitional level. You describe creativity, if I had it right, as novelty plus value in the book. Is either one of those generally harder than the other to achieve? And does the answer differ between humans and machines?
Oh, that's such a cool question. So novelty plus value, they're like pulling you in opposite directions. So the challenge is to achieve some kind of balance between the two. If all you need is novelty, it's trivial, right? Generate a new string of characters. It's so easy to create one that nobody's seen before, but also nobody's going to care, right? Or a new recipe by throwing together, I don't know, random foods and non-foods, for sure going to be original, but who cares, right? And value, you can create value by doing a small perturbation on an existing valuable thing. Take a recipe, adjust the amount of salt a little bit, right? Yay, look at me. The trick is something genuinely new and genuinely valuable. And the way that I see the role of AI is not so much to give us new creative stuff, but to help us see more. So when we engage in anything creative, like writing music, making art, our human brains, search fairly narrowly, each one of us differently, but fairly narrowly in the space of creative possibilities, based on what we know, based on our style, based on our preferences. And what AI can do, what I've done with my company, with Lyric Studio, Melody Studio, but what can be done on, much, much wider scale, what artists use Midjourney for, is just to see more broadly into the space of possibilities. Not even necessarily to take what the AI suggests, but just to see those new paths that were not open to you before. And that is huge in scientific research and in art alike.
The book talks about creative processes versus creative products. I'm curious which you enjoyed more, writing your book or its final form?
Thanks for asking. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I love process. I think nowhere is it more pronounced than when I make art. The process it's like working out, it's challenging. You feel that you're growing, and then you have the product, and that's kind of fun because then you can share it with somebody. You can show it to someone. So I appreciate that part of it. But if I'm really honest, the product never feels good enough to me in anything, which is a problem with artists in general. But that just gives us more reason to keep going. Yeah, if it was that's a problem with a lot of current AI systems. They rush you to the product and they steal the process from you. And that's why a lot of them don't have good retention too.
There's that hollowness. Yeah. What had to be cut from the book that you loved?
Oh, I think what I wrote was about twice as long. I don't know I think I kept what I loved the most.
Yeah?
I think I did. I think what's more, I think from writing it, a lot of stuff came up within me that I wish I'd included in retrospect. And I think the main one, and I'm going to make sure that that's more clear in my next book, is to more clearly articulate the idea of the all-knowing oracle. Because I feel like that sort of vision that science fiction told us, which is in the book, but it really, it should have been more central, if I'm honest. So the all-knowing oracle is this idea of this AI that knows everything, right? This godlike creature, there's so much connection to theology here. And this concept is so problematic, and it's probably the main reason that AI is causing problems. Because we take it too seriously, we trust it too much, and the moment you suggest that you shouldn't be trusting it so much, people say, what's the point, right? It's like the only goal that we're going after. It's this illusionary, super unhelpful goal, instead of kind of realizing that AI can be something else. It can be a muse, it can be an enrichment tool, it can be something that helps us realize our own potential. So we desperately need new metaphors.
Was there a belief you held before creative machines that was changed after it?
I think a lot of my ideas sort of got sharpened, kind of, like a sculpture, right? Like I thought I knew what I wanted to write, but as I wrote it, it got chiseled and it got a lot more crisp. I spent a lot of time on the little poems in the book, and that was a lot of fun, kind of using different AI systems to try to get me to where I wanted to go. So there was kind of a lot of learning that happened through there. And there were a lot of if I'm honest, a lot of little facts that I had to look up. So I learned a little bit more about kind of the details of some of the systems that I talk about a lot. So I know like in a little bit more detail exactly what happened when, and some little stories I got to learn. So it was an incredibly enriching journey for me, for sure.
Roughly speaking, how long was the entire writing process, including the research and getting granular, like you were just saying?
I spent about 4 months banging my head against a wall.
Yeah.
So there was a few months of just like utter and complete non-productivity. I was trying to see if I can get AI to help me draft to get going. And I was like, wow, was that useless? Like it would just pull me. AI wanted me to write the book everyone else was writing.
Mm-hmm. Basically.
Anything I would write, it would neutralize. It was ridiculous. So finally, after getting the same advice 3 times, always listen to other people. I sat down and started drafting completely by myself. No spell check, like nothing. These horrible, rough drafts. I wouldn't let myself like correct the spelling error. And finally things started to roll. And the first draft was rough, but there was a draft and the ideas were mine and it was real and honest. The whole thing, once I actually started to write, took about 8 months. But that's pretty much most of what I did those 8 months.
Last question specifically pertaining to the book for this section, but zooming outside of it now. What are you tired of hearing about in regards to AI and creativity at this point?
Oh my God. What am I tired of hearing about? A lot of the narrative is so narrow. It's so narrow because it's like we're oscillating between 2 extremes, right? One is like, AI cannot be creative. It's just a stochastic parrot. It is so foolish and useless, right? That's kind of what's the common attempt to make ourselves feel better. And at the other extreme, it is so much better than us. It's going to replace us. There is no point in doing anything creative. One or the other. And sort of the thing that might appear to be in between is like the idea that you only use AI when you don't want to do something yourself, right? So let's say I write a song. If I don't want to write lyrics, then I use AI to write lyrics, right? But it is so untrue. It's a completely fabricated view of AI, kind of directed by these commercial interests, and really a lack of insight on the part of people who are deciding how to use AI, having known about it for 5 minutes. So it's the beauty of AI is to get into the process with you and really help you within that process to the degree that you need help. So I love writing lyrics. And yet, like we use my system, Lyric Studio, I use it to help inspire me, to help me see broader than I'm seeing right now, to help me see where else I can go in little tiny snippets, to help expand my creative process and expand my possibilities without ever restricting me, without ever feeling that I have to use it. And I use ChatGPT in the same way. If I want, some help with editing, I never feel that I need to defer to it, but sometimes it helps me find a nicer phrasing. I spent a whole day on the conclusion of my book, exploring hundreds of variations on every single sentence, right? Did I need it? Did it save time? Did it replace me? No, it just helped me see more broadly. Actually, annoyingly so, I had to stop. I was wasting too much time. So there is we need to broaden how we understand the role of AI in creativity, and it's a much more nuanced, much more collaborative space where there's a lot of juicy possibilities.
Okay, Maya, you have once again segued for me beautifully. I'd love to shift to WaveAI, the musical Gen AI startup of which you are CEO, co-founder, which features Lyric Studio and Melody Studio. If the homework again is right, you started researching generative AI models for text, music, and art in 2014, somewhere around there. You launched WaveAI, musical AI for musicians, in November of 2017. I'm curious what key moments were in those 3 years.
I mean, a part of it was just realizing how hard it is to run a business. I was coming in as an academic. I knew what I had was right. It was just late 2017. We've been doing the research for a couple of years. It made an enormous difference in my own songwriting. I've seen my friend, James Morgan, who's a professor in our department at San Jose State University, non-musician, use our system that all it did was generate melodies in the style of Giacomo Puccini. He made this amazing Italian aria with it. It was surreal. I've seen the capacity. But running a business is a lot more than that, right? It's convincing other people who are not in your field to understand your vision. It's getting the funds together. It's kind of getting people to know what you're building. So it took us a little bit of time to find our footing. And finally, in 2020, during the pandemic, we had our third product, and our first success was Lyric Studio. We had a couple of other products beforehand that were kind of in and around the same kind of assistive songwriting with AI. And I think the most memorable moment, and the one that I'm ironically most proud of, was when one of our users told us that he wants to unsubscribe because he learned how to write lyrics by using our system. Which might sound commercially very negative, right? But I think that I don't want anybody to create abusive relationships with their users, like social media does, like AI is starting to do, building in addictive cycles. I want our users to use our tools because they want to, and I want them to grow as human beings in their creative capacities from using our tools. And a lot of people stick around for years and years because they keep finding value from it. But if somebody feels that they reach the levels they want to reach, they should be able to let go, and they should be able to retain that creative growth as they let go. And I really, really hope that not only kind of from an AI standpoint that this is going to resonate, but fundamentally for business, we need to let go of addiction, let go of kind of treating our users with such disrespect towards respecting the human capacity in people, and really having people pay us because we are good for them, being the oranges and apples instead of, the candies and heroin of AI.
Mm-hmm. So going back then, at the beginning of your research, let's call it 2014, 2015, did you have an entrepreneurial streak at that point? Did you know you wanted to sort of transform this into a business at some point, or you were just head over heels for the research in 2014, 2015, and the business, WaveAI, would just come naturally later?
The very first time, so the guy who's to become my co-founder, David Locher, he made the initial prototype of our Melody tech, which now powers Melody Studio. A later variant of it powers Melody Studio. So I would give it like a line of lyrics like, it's so fun to be on your podcast today. And it would give me different ways to sing it. Like, it's so fun to be on your podcast today. Or it's so fun to be on your podcast today. Right? There are so many options. It would show me all these options I'd never think of. And I think the first experience of writing with it, and I'm not even going to say that I wrote something great with it right away, but I felt my creative process just blow up in possibilities. I could hear new melodies that I couldn't hear before, even not those suggested by the AI. And I knew we had something commercial right away. It just honestly took a long time for an academic to find sort of the courage to go and speak to investors, to officially open a company. So it's hopefully somebody listening, it gives them the courage to do the same.
Lovely. With WaveAI, what did you bet on that others thought was a mistake?
We were starting during an AI winter. People were getting tired of hearing about AI, which was at the time synonymous with recommendation engines, because that was sort of the previous success. And I remember meeting up with investors and them telling me, no, AI is dead. There is nothing else interesting with it. And I was trying to explain that this is different. This is about sort of generating and creating using AI. And it was really, really hard, to convince people that there was a new place to go. Just the whole idea of using AI to create was so foreign that a lot of people didn't really believe in it.
Alternatively, what's a decision with WaveAI you got wrong, and what did you take from it?
I mean, honestly, you make so much mistakes already in any business. Oh my goodness. Wow. One of the hardest things, and this is not specific to me, this is anybody, is learning to hire and fire. It's so hard. Firing people is one of the most difficult things you're ever going to do. And if you want a successful business and you're a startup and you don't have a lot of money, you have to do it fast. And that was super, super difficult. Oh my God. Also, learning how to promote things, the fact that you could have you could have the mortality cure. And if you don't promote it, no one's going to know. Right. And you're going to need to promote it loudly, even if you have something that's literally life-saving. So learning to be kind of brave enough to promote and invest money and figuring out how to promote effectively and cost effectively. My co-founders ended up cracking Facebook ads and then Google ads. And that was kind of this massive push forward. Oh, goodness. Learning to charge. I kept wanting to make our products free or to make them super cheap. There's a just desire to give and be a nice human, but you can't do good with your product if you can't promote it to people and you can't have it reach people. So becoming brave enough to charge. I mean, it was 8 years of learning.
What part of founding or being a founder requires the most creativity?
Oh, goodness. Learning how to explain your business to people and to investors, to different populations. It requires enormous creativity and sometimes not the same kind of creativity that it takes to invent a product. So I'm a researcher. I'm good at coming up with like new AI stuff. I've come up with new AI models. I've come up with new AI applications. I see that very clearly. That comes naturally. But then a company, and when you're a small company in the beginning, right, when you can't hire the best talent for every single role, you have to kind of flex your own muscles. And one of our ads that is still running, I made back in 2020 myself. It's fun. It's fun. You get to grow different kinds of muscles.
Absolutely. You're a researcher who became a CEO. What did building a company teach you that decades in academia could not?
The real world is an amazing playground. So academia kind of has this. Academia is an ivory tower. Okay, academia is so essential because almost everything, including generative AI, that has ever changed the world has come from academia. So don't get me wrong, it is so necessary and it is so wonderful.
Yeah.
Right? But you get to be in your ivory tower. You teach. You slowly work on different projects. It doesn't matter if other people like them or not. All you need to do is convince a journal or your colleagues at a conference to accept a paper, which is its own process. It's non-trivial. But the real world is unforgiving. People are either paying for your product or they're not. You're either making payroll and you're not. And that pushes you to be better, smarter, more capable, more humble, honestly, than academia ever could, in my case.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to music for a bit. If everyone can write a professional sounding song in minutes, and that is our present and future, do you see a risk of abundance diluting meaning? Okay.
So one thing that's often, so first of all, you're right. Like Suno and Udio, if you haven't played with them, they're phenomenal. They can create, you press a button, you get a great song. You could give a little bit of input if you want to. You don't have to. We never had, I mean, in recent years, we did not have a shortage of music problem. Okay? Spotify, before AI, was filled with amazing artists nobody's ever heard about. So this is not a problem that needed to be solved, right? Is it even worse right now? Of course it is. Obviously, you have companies whose entire business model is to flood Spotify with AI-generated music so they can make a little bit of pennies here and there, and it's all gonna add up and take whatever little crumbs have been left to small artists. Okay, that's our reality. That's what people have chosen to do. But what I firmly believe, very, very firmly, is that human plus AI is always going to beat AI alone. And so what we need is to build AI tools, and we have some of that, but we need a lot more, that are designed to extract creativity out of humans, like in a collaborative, not in a like extortative way. Yeah, in a way that, like, the music inside of me is going to be more meaningful to people like myself than whatever AI can generate. So it's about helping me express myself better and perhaps help me find new genres, help me find new sound. And you do that to people and you help people stay ahead in this weird new reality that we find ourselves in.
I think we've hovered on this next one a little bit, but I'd love to drill down on it. Where is the line between AI as a creative collaborator and a creative crutch?
You know, telling the difference is not that hard. I think so much of the technology we have is built to be a crutch that it's hard to realize sometimes that there's an alternative. Mm. So I recommend that people check out some stuff that's designed to be a collaborator so you can feel the difference. So, for example, so Lyric Studio is one. That's my own product. If you're a little bit technical and don't mind struggling with installing something, there's a system in Harvey Mudd by my late colleague Robert Keller called Improviser. It's for free, and you can improvise music with it. You play a little bit, it plays a little bit. Nobody replaces anybody. But it literally helped me improvise successfully for the first time in my life and helped me to permanently become a better improviser, right? So these concepts, this stuff exists, but it's not really what's commercially available. Now, the middle point, which is sort of available to everybody, is to try to use something like ChatGPT or Claude for writing, right? For like creative writing, let's say. So, but you gotta get really creative there. Like, ask it for feedback on your writing. Don't ask it to write everything. Ask it to give you 10 different variants on this one sentence or this one phrase and see if something inspires you. If you're an artist, check out Midjourney and see if it could show you new places to go. So you almost have to use these tools in the way they were not intended. And what we're starting to see, but like at glacial speed, is these companies realize that their power users use their system very differently than intended. And they're gradually making that easier to do, but like so slowly that there are so many business opportunities in the meantime.
There are artists currently suing AI companies over training data. Who do you think wins that argument, legally and morally? And are those the same answer?
There are not as much artists, but aggregated right holders that are suing AI companies. And these right holders are the one who make money on these lawsuits, not the artists. That's my main point in this whole argument. And it doesn't mean that there's so much nuance here. So
let's break this down, because I don't know the nitty gritty of this. I assume many people don't. Are these representatives of these artists? Are they labels?
They're like Universal Audio, Warner, New York Times, right? These are companies who make their money by owning the right and selling in various ways contents for millions of people, right? So the challenge, I mean, I hate this because I do feel for the artists and I care more about the artists and the content creators. But I think sometimes because we don't understand the details, we feel like we're saying the right thing, but really we're just helping a different entity. Helping another kind of multi-billion-dollar company win over a different multi-billion-dollar company. So if you need hundreds of millions of songs or articles to have your engine, okay, you're not going to pay $100 to each person who made that content. The math doesn't work. The business wouldn't survive. But you could pay $1 million or $2 million to somebody who owns a whole bunch of the data. And so that's what ends up happening, right? When these lawsuits go through, that's how they settle. None of the money, like none of it, from everything I've heard, I apologize if I missed some fringe case, but from as far as I know, none of the money makes it back into a creator's pocket. But these right holder companies end up making money. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's okay. I'm not saying that this is a negative outcome. I'm just saying that this is what we're picketing for. But this is not where things stop. It's not like, oh, creators can't make money, so we just lie down and die, right? I think we need to understand what I believe we should be fighting for. So the problem with a lot of these companies is not that the problem with how some AI companies run their business. Let me clarify that. In my opinion, the biggest problem is not that they took people's data, is what the product does, right? So as human beings, we constantly consume data. But if I then go and I'm like, here's a Taylor Swift album that Taylor Swift didn't actually write, that my AI wrote, or that I wrote, right? That I'm pretending to be Taylor Swift. Illegal activity, right? You're not allowed to do this. And so AI should not be allowed to do this too. We shouldn't be impersonating people. We shouldn't be stealing their style. We shouldn't be stealing their voice. And on top of it, I don't think, and this is my bigger point, I don't think we should be building any technology to replace any human artists. And so I think that, we can keep, if we want to defend the big right holders, that's fine. We can defend them too. I don't mind. But I think if we really want to benefit individual creators, we need to fight against AI that aims to replace them, and God forbid, AI that imitates specific creators.
Appreciate you crystallizing all that. I'd like to switch to just a smidge of computing and then AI from a industry sort of macro sense. Your computer science PhD thesis was on theoretical foundations of clustering, which from my very, very naive understanding essentially boils down to finding structure amidst a chaos in a computational sense. Can you explain clustering in, let's say, ninth grade speak? And then did that PhD focus at all shape how you think about creativity?
I don't get to talk about this a lot anymore. Thank you for asking. I spent so many years of my life on foundations of cluster analysis. So the idea is that you can have data, you can imagine them as stars in the sky, right? And you want to divide them into meaningful groups, right? In reality, it could be something like Spotify users, right? You want to better target songs to different users, so you want to cluster them. This is sort of the previous wave of machine learning. Or maybe you just want to understand stars better, so that's why you want to cluster them. There could be, there's a lot of different kind of midpoint applications for cluster analysis in machine learning. But how do you do this, right? And there are different algorithms, and the different algorithms do it differently, right? So some of them do it based on proximity, right? So stuff that's really close to you. So you can kind of like, it's almost like you can be building a snake. You know, you can start at one point, and you can find the closest point to it, and then you kind of greedily find the next closest point. So you might end up with clusters that look like long snakes, right? Based on what happens to be closest to each other. Or you might say, no, like I want like the center of the clusters to be really well separated, and then things to sort of kind of like galaxies center around the black hole, right? So you have the same data can be clustered very, very differently. And so what is correct, right? And that's sort of what a lot of my work focused on, admitting that clustering is not like this uniform thing that can always be done in one way, and understanding which clustering algorithm to pick for different applications. And I did a whole bunch of math and proofs that sort of builds this foundational understanding of the different ways that the same stuff can be clustered.
Okay. In terms of just a 20-second history of the field, is there a mother, a father of it? How did you discover it?
So my cluster analysis journey goes back to the beginning of my master's. I entered the class, and then there is Shai Ben David there. And he just made it all like incredibly interesting. He kind of helped me see how much magic there was in these foundational concepts. And that was also really fast, kind of like this Harold Cohen. It was very fast as computational creativity, except, you know, Shai Ben David became my PhD, my master, the PhD advisor. We did a lot of really cool work together. I think on a personal level, I think I needed, for various reasons in my life, I needed something really concrete and something about math and kind of things being provable from one principle to another in a way that was really solid, really appealed to me at the time. And so really I spent my entire PhD doing math in reality. It was kind of the mathematical aspect of cluster analysis. And I think that was a really important counterbalance to my creative side. I learned how to sing opera during my PhD. And at first they seemed world apart, because in the end, when you want to make a real impact, I think you need, well, in my case, you kind of need both parts of the brain super developed, you know, the creative and the logical. And if I just developed the creative, I think I would just fall into hallucinatory places that wouldn't have any value, right? And if I just stayed with the rigid and kind of logical, I think I would just get super bored. So, really, really grateful that kind of my PhD focused on math, which I loved and which has so much beauty in it. You know, I do not want to downplay it for a second. But at the same time, I got to learn how to sing opera, and it's a marriage of these two things.
Yeah. We're going to get there too. So, seasoned veteran in computation, mathematics, you got into Gen AI well over a decade ago. When you got into Gen AI, did you know the Turing test would be passed in the early 2020s? Was that something you thought about?
The Turing test was passed around 2016.
2016? My research, okay. I read the wrong source, but...
No. At a different level. It's funny. The Turing test is a bit of a more moving target, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is correct as well. I didn't mean it in this way. But technically, there was this cheating system, right? Which kind of created the equivalent of a Ukrainian boy, which passed I think it was called the name with Eugene, or something similar to it. And it was a group out of Eastern Europe that made this chatbot kind of like make a lot of mistakes, and you felt like you were talking to an immigrant as a Turing test. Right. And so it was kind of, you'd be more forgiving because you thought you were talking to a kid who's not fluent in English. So they cheated their way into it. Right. So in some sense, it was passed earlier. Right. But it was passed much more holistically and much more authentically with the rise of LLMs. Did I know this was going to happen? Look, I mean, I come at AI from a creative lens, right? I come at it from computational creativity. I see its value differently. Once ChatGPT came out and a lot of investor money started getting pulled in, a lot of effort went into creating this all-knowing oracle, which had to be right, which had to be godlike. And in the process, a lot of amazing AI breakthroughs happened, even if I feel that the goal is ultimately not that worthwhile. No, I think I was surprised at how far it went into these sort of non-creative directions. It was a surprise for me.
Some questions on AI and hallucinations, which do permeate your book, but also you spoke last year at BBVA's Fin AI Summit. And if the quote is correct, you said, quote, "I believe that the central mechanism underlying creativity, both in machine intelligence and in humans, is hallucinations." Can you elaborate on how?
Hallucinations are my number one favorite topic because I think it's the most misunderstood. So there's a researcher called Cesar Neal. I love his work. And he works on neuroscience. And he explains that we humans hallucinate all the time. Low-grade hallucinations, which are nearly constant, because as we walk around the world, we need to predict what's going to happen next. And that's a critical evolutionary advantage, because it used to be that a rustle in the bushes could mean a tiger. And it was important to predict that you should move away from the bushes, even if you were wrong. And now, a certain sound, you see something out of the corner of your eye and you get out of the way and the car didn't hit you, right? So you're constantly predicting. When I was in college, I don't know why I tell this story all the time. My boyfriend and I broke up and I was heartbroken. And he's this tall, blonde Russian guy. And I would see him everywhere, right? The person would be coming far away. I'm like, oh my God, this is my ex-boyfriend. And then it come closer and it's not, right? So I'm mispredicting. I'm like low-grade hallucinating. And the other was a short Asian lady. And I was like, okay, this has to stop. Right, and I stopped. So we are hallucinating all the time. But it's not a bug. It's not a bug because that's how we think. We think by predicting what's going to come next. Okay. And sometimes we can amplify it on purpose and make art and come up with a business idea and go around talking about this world that we made up and raise money for it. Right. Or write a fiction book and invite people into art hallucinations. Right. Everybody knowing what's going on, everybody knowing that it's fake. Right. And the AI is the same. The ability to hallucinate, the ability to imagine is the ability to think. It's the same thing. It's the same mechanism. And I think my next book, I really want to expand on that.
If hallucination is the engine of creativity, I'm curious about judgment and taste. Where does that come from in terms of selecting from this greater swath of, we'll call it options, from which a creative could pull?
So we get out there into this massive world of possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which hallucinations make possible, which, let's be honest, hallucinogenics really amplify for some people. That being illegal, so I'm not endorsing it here. But it can really kind of blow up the space of possibilities, whatever it is that helps you accomplish that. And then, at some point you need to put something on paper, ink on paper, oil on canvas. And at some point, it's kind of two different mechanisms. You have the generation and the evaluation, and the computational creativity community has had these two separate components for a long time. But really, you go back and forth. You need to be able to give yourself complete freedom. Utter and complete freedom. Write without editing, without fixing a spelling mistake. That's how you start writing.
Like you did with your book in that one stretch.
Exactly. Paint stuff you hate. I went back to painting recently, and for like 2 weeks, I hated everything that I did.
Yeah.
But I kept going, right? And you need the judge is gonna wake up. Honestly, for most of us, it's so strong, it's so powerful that we don't need to work on waking it up. It's going to come in and it's going to do its job, and we need to have the strength to allow criticism to the beautiful stuff that we burst, right? So that we can do better. And then we go back and forth, let's say the criticism is that, I don't know, the colors don't work well, then you need to go back and maybe learn how to pick colors better. Or, one thing that I realized is that some of my writing would cycle. I would kind of keep bringing back the same ideas in a way that wasn't effective. And so I had to really buckle down and figure out how to do better in that regard. And that was a hard pill to swallow, taking feedback from an LLM, but I understood that the feedback was valid. And so I worked through it. So it's kind of both. It's this tension between opening your soul and trusting yourself. And then at other times, not at the same time, at other times, being willing to be humble and accept that you have room for growth.
Lovely. You recently wrote, I believe it was a LinkedIn post in the context of a larger topic, but that the smarter AI gets, the more intelligent we need to be. If that's enough of a cue, can you elaborate?
Yeah, that's a very recent post. The worst thing that can happen with AI is that we turn off our minds. And we're seeing that. A lot of people are responding to AI in this way. They're turning to it, they're trusting it, they think that the AI is smarter than them. And it's just not true. It's just not true. When you get deep into any expertise at all, whether it be about expertise about your own life, expertise about whatever you want to express, or real kind of expertise in certain domains, AI falls short. AI tends towards the mean. Well, or let me be a little bit more honest, the AIs we have today tend towards the mean. It's absurd to imagine that something that we build is going to be smarter than every single person, or holistically smarter than the capacity of a child, So we really need to teach people, just like we did with calculators. First of all, there's some basic cognitive skills that we need to develop, right? Children need to be taught how to write and write well by themselves, for example, even when AI can do it quite well, so that they can come to the AI with a critical mind turned on. So when AI gives them information about politics, about history, that they have the intellect to be like, well, the AI probably has a point of view, right? And that's okay. We need to be okay with that, right? But we can't take it at face value. We need to be able to critically engage with anything that comes out of LLMs.
Is it a minor or large concern from your vantage point about the prevalence of relationships with AIs?
25% of single people are romantically bonding with AI.
25%?
25%. That's the statistics I heard by an expert in a talk months ago. 25% of singles are romantically bonding with AI. Here's my opinion. This is something that I'm going to be honest, this is something that I'm still figuring out, that I'm very curious to learn more about and understand more. But here's kind of my broad current thinking of it, if I may. I think it's a symptom. I think it's a symptom of loneliness in our society. I would really love to see studies across different cultures. And I bet that the Western world would see a much higher percent of that form of bonding than societies where humans are closer to each other. We're so focused in the Western world on boundaries, right? You're supposed to be, and I mean that respectfully, right? That's just our culture here.
Yeah.
Boundaries and personal space physically, personal space emotionally. You're not supposed to be too strong with your views with family and friends. I wasn't born in a culture like this, right? So the way my mother would behave would always clash with the way that this world is. There are other ways, Israeli culture, even Russian culture that I was born into. We know a lot of Latin cultures, Native American cultures are so much closer. People are closer to each other. In some of these cultures, there's less physical distance. You're allowed to say what you think a little louder to your friends and family. You just spend more time together with friends and family. Families sometimes live together. Extended families live together. And the Western, I can feel the Western reaction is right? No, but that's the flip side of it. If we deprioritize this, if we focus too much on the negative of being together, then we are likely to fall into loneliness and isolation. And woohoo, this AI, which will always respect your boundaries, which you can always turn off, suddenly doesn't seem like such a bad idea if you're really feeling alone, right? Because in human relationships, you need to tolerate some discomfort. You need to tolerate this being a genuinely autonomous, separate thing that might demand things you're not happy about, right? That might overstep your personal space in different ways. I think we need to learn how to be human again. AI is not going to fix it for us.
Sticking with an AI macro topic, but circling back to a smaller one we briefly touched on. I'm curious, I mean, we are still in this very nascent stage of AI, LLMs, what have you, being household presences. How AI will shape children's learning of the arts and artistic expression, how you see that unfolding.
I think in that way, there's still a long way to go. A lot of art programs have been very slow to incorporate AI for very, very good reason, because a lot of the technology we have is replacive. I really, really believe that the world will move towards building AI tools that genuinely elevate people. Like what we want to create is this permanent lasting impact. I call this humble creative machines, tools that help an adult or a child tap deeper into their creative capabilities in a way that doesn't foster addiction or dependence. And so the child could use AI and then become a better pen and paper artist, right? Become a better poet when they don't use AI. And as we have more and more tools like that, then it becomes appropriate to start incorporating them into education. The way as things stand today, we need to be very careful, right? Because the last thing we want to do with young minds is reinforce this all-knowing oracle metaphor, reinforce the idea that there's no point to try anymore. Because it's not true. Because it's not true. All these tools are doing are creating extremely typical art and extremely typical music. It's just not the future that we want to reinforce here.
Maya, is there any issue in all of AI, maybe a moral dilemma of sorts, that you find yourself going back and forth on?
Dilemma in AI. Something that I struggle with. I think the most perplexing recently has been around interpersonal relationships, kind of parasocial relationship with AI. I think is where I feel like I have a lot to learn.
Okay.
I heard an amazing speaker recently who suggested that she was actually viewing it positively, and I feel like that's a lens that I don't fully understand yet, and I really want to learn.
Positively. Was there a robotics angle to this? I'm just curious. Speaking of machines, but that's coming clearly.
So not so much in her talk, but the robotics, I think, her name is Kamna, by the way, brilliant woman. The idea, I think, was that if something brings joy to people, then there is kind of naturally a positive angle. But I think there was more. So there's more for me to understand about what's positive here, because even when things kind of rub against my belief, it seems really odd to me, and maybe I have a negative kind of visceral reaction. It's very important for me to not stop there, because if there is something I did not spend enough time learning, enough listening to enough experts, then I withhold judgment until I know more. And this is where I'm at with this particular topic. And I really think that this is an attitude I learned from academia, right? This don't rush. Don't assume that your initial reflex is correct, because it might not be, right? And you really learn that from math. You think that if the proof is going to go a certain way, it doesn't work, and so you realize you have to go a different way. And I think this is something we need to do with AI more broadly, kind of slow down. Don't assume too quickly. Take the time to not only to listen to experts, but also to have your own personal experiences with AI to see what it is for you.
I'd love to talk a little bit just about education, learning, and research. Hopefully this is enough to tee you up, but I loved this story when I encountered it. Can you tell the story of what happened with the University of Dundee?
We did an amazing study with them. They were studying bereavement and curious how it could interlace with computational creativity, with Gen AI. And we had a previous version of our technology. We called it Alicia, so something that would help you write a song, help you with lyrics, help you with melodies. And so we got several people who had recently lost a loved one to write a song about them. It was really fascinating. So people would come in feeling that they couldn't write lyrics. And they would actually say that. They would verbalize it. It's like, I don't know how to write lyrics. And then the AI would help them a little bit, give them like an idea. And then all of them, with no exception, would mostly write stuff on their own using the AI very little. All the AI did was give them the confidence, help them get started, show them it's not that complicated. And they wrote stuff about their loved ones, and they all had this really meaningful processing experience, which psychologists would tell us is really what you need to do when bereavement is happening, to process, to think about your loved one, to sort of iterate on it like that. And so the fact that AI could meaningfully help people through the bereavement process in a way that really remains, all the agency is in the hands of the person, helping them enter the creative space in the bereavement context. That's still one of the most meaningful use cases.
Wow, that's unbelievably poignant. Can you break down how, so there, the way I understood it, I mean, the three parties, you have WaveAI, so you guys, there's the university. How were these people selected? And then I suppose who found whom and really got the initial ball rolling for this study?
So it was at the International Conference on Computational Creativity. I saw my colleague Alison Pease speak about bereavement and computational creativity. She gave a talk about it, identifying opportunities in the space. And I found her after her talk, and I said, I have an idea. We could test it out with some of my tools.
Wow.
And she got really excited as well. And then her student Lee was kind of the one who actually ran the study and made the solicitation to find participants. It was all done very, very, very carefully, very respectfully, because of course it's such a delicate topic. Yeah, it was a lot of work. It took over a year.
Incredible case study. To what extent are researchers creatives?
Well, in the computational creativity space, almost every single one of them. Like, we spend an inordinate amount of time, but I think you mean more broadly.
Yeah, just in what sense? I mean, what defines the creativity? I mean, in what avenues of the research, and be it papers, experiments?
Research ideally is something truly new and truly valuable, right? Just like any other creative artifact. So neural networks were invented by researchers.
Mm-hmm.
The first generative AI systems were built by researchers. Almost everything we have originated from research. Not every single researcher is equally creative. Not every single researcher is equally successful too, right? So it's, it's like in any job, right? But fundamentally, the capacity to go into new spaces and come up with something genuinely new that no one has ever done before, that your colleagues will accept into a conference or journal, is a really important kind of creativity, and not an easy one. And it really does take time for almost every single person who is a successful researcher. I mean, there is your undergrad, your master's, your PhD, a ton of kind of old school master student learning, right? Where you learn from your advisor. It's a journey.
Absolutely. If we come back to your definition, okay, from the book, right? So we break down novelty plus value. Is one of those more potent than the other in research pursuits?
I think the interplay is the same. There's a lot of research that people call incremental. Mm-hmm. So research that makes a really small step from another paper, and actually the great majority of research is incremental. That has value but has less novelty.
Got it.
Right? Over time, if you kind of stack, and the argument is that if you stack a whole bunch of them together, you might end up with something really great because the novelty sort of accrues over time. But in reality, a lot of great work happens by people who are willing to step further. And sometimes that work is harder to get in because it's more innovative, so people are not as used to thinking about it and might not understand its value very quickly. But a lot of real innovation actually happens like that, with a massive push forward by people who kind of have the personality also to be willing to take risks in their career, to be more curious than they're interested in, fulfilling a checklist for their job. Yeah, research creativity is probably one of the most intense forms of creativity for the people who, the real version of it is cognitively very powerful. And actually, AI systems nowadays are trying to replicate that. So there's quite a bit of effort by some of
Mm-hmm.
the bigger players to replicate that form of innovation.
Great. You have many years of professorship under your belt. How have you noticed student creativity change with the rise of creative machines?
So I did notice there was a little bit of polarization at the time. I've been on leave over the past year, but beforehand, I saw it's one student that comes to mind, but it was more than one, whose creativity was just so amazing. The way that he was using LLMs and other AI systems and the speed in which he'd explore new territory and come up with new ideas was so real. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I've never seen this from faculty. I've never seen this from anybody. This student's ability to be creative around these systems and with them was at its own level. And then unfortunately, you have kind of another side, people who would feel really intimidated by these systems and would kind of had trouble finding their own place, the place for their own creativity when these all-knowing, quote unquote, all-knowing oracles already exist. So I tried really hard to convince students that their creativity matters. But it's hard. It's almost like we're all swimming in new waters together.
Per Google Scholar, your published papers have been cited thousands of times. I'll say University of Dundee aside. Of which paper are you the most proud and why?
Oh, pick your favorite child. I don't know. It's always, you're always most excited about the most recent work. I think that's very common. My work on brilliance bias in AI with Juliana Chihada, my PhD student who is graduating right now, was recently came out. I'm really hoping that that's something that people will read and benefit from. We talked a little bit about brilliance bias earlier in this episode. I did a ton of work on foundations of cluster analysis. My most cited paper is actually work I did with my colleague, Naomi Brownstein, which was on clusterability methods, where we sort of help people navigate between different methods of deciding how clusterable data is. So a little bit more of a technical paper.
Mm-hmm.
One of my other best cited papers was the precursor to my company. So a paper that details an algorithm for vocal melody generation. At a certain point, impact starts feeling different. I think when you're early in your kind of academic career, the papers are really kind of the focus. And at a certain point, I always wanted to make an impact. And so I'm glad to see my paper cited, but how much people read my book, how much I see my ideas permeate culture, it's kind of, things shifted a little bit towards that direction recently.
Surely gratifying. Within the papers, was there ever a research sequence, a study that altered a view you held of a technology?
I always learn from the research that I do. Always. Even if you come in with a hypothesis, you end up learning so much in the process. Do you sometimes completely pivot your view? Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
For example, we did an analysis recently. So talking about brilliance bias, right? We did an analysis of brilliance bias of earlier models like GPT-3. That's when we started the research. These were the best models. And then there's a lot of brilliance bias in a system like Midjourney. And actually, a lot of text-to-image models have ample brilliance bias. Basically, you ask for a genius, you get a guy. That's the 2-second version of that. But then we went back, and this is not published, it's just kind of an analysis we did on the side. We went back to ChatGPT and Gemini, some recent models, and kind of redid some of the brilliance bias analysis. And we saw that a lot of improvement has happened in the interim. And that's always really fun to watch because this stuff is happening in real time. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see how much these systems have improved on this dimension.
The final question for this portion on learning. I'm curious, which individual has taught you the most about anything?
Oh, goodness. probably my spouse in the end of the day, David Locher, who's a brilliant AI researcher himself right now, VP of AI at CodeRabbit, phenomenal AI startup. Him and I ran WaveAI for many years. We've done a lot of research papers together. He's a very, very, very smart and very brave person. And I think a lot of my bravery to go into new territories have come with his support. But also my PhD advisor, Shaiban David, taught me how to think, taught me to be a researcher, and he's a brilliant researcher. So that's been just incredible fortune to learn directly from him, to learn from him one-on-one. And my research community, the computational creativity research community, been so many researchers there, Rafael Perez, Alison Pease, and just, Dan Brown, who was involved both in my PhD and as a researcher in that research community. I owe so much to my research community.
Do I have it right? Did you mention earlier that a significant portion of that group is located in Europe? Did I catch that right?
A lot of the researchers are in Europe. We have some on this continent.
Is that a coincidence? Is there a rhyme and reason to that?
Well, in general, Europe is more, they approach research a little bit differently, and they value the arts more than it's valued here. So I think in that sense, it's a little bit not as surprising, because this was a very unpopular field, right? And in research, people don't think about it like this, but research is still subject to like financial interests to some degree, to where you can get funding, to what universities are willing to hire. And in Europe, it's a little bit more flexible. I feel like researchers have a little bit more freedom. And so I think that's part of the reason that it emerged more there. But there still is a kind of a healthy number of researchers on this continent. We are actually organizing the International Conference on Computational Creativity next year.
Beautiful.
So this year it's in Coimbra, and then it's going to be in San Jose in 2027.
Oh, excellent. Lovely. Maya, you've shared so much knowledge. I would really love to unpack more of your actual journey, if you'd be so kind, because it is a rare one. I think rich with value. You were born in Soviet Belarus, is that correct?
Yeah.
Moved to Israel at 7, moved to Canada at 12. Where did your creative obsession first take root, and to what extent was your environment or your environments a factor?
There's research showing that immigrants tend to be more creative. And I think it's because we see that the world doesn't have to be the way it is. It's very, very jarring for a child. You're 7 years old, you just barely learned what's what. And then suddenly the whole world changes. And then you're 12 and you really think you know what's what. And then everything changes again. The journey has been really hard in some ways, if I'm really honest. Like my the personal arc of my early life was complicated. So, in Belarus, Chernobyl happened when I was 3 years old. This massive explosion. My mom kind of took us and the kids of her colleagues to a different part of the USSR to try to get us away from the radiation. When I moved to Israel, the Gulf War broke out. So we were worried about a nuclear holocaust, and there were sirens, and there were some. Anyways, it was a very, very scary time in its own right. And I was very, very young, so there wasn't when you're that young, it's hard to make sense and kind of organize it in your mind properly. I started piano lessons in Russia, and my mom wanted me to take violin lessons, so I did a little bit of that as a very, very small child. And Israel really was when my piano stuff really grew, so I practiced about an hour a day, and that was my main art. I performed as a main character in a school play. I sang at every opportunity, and I was just this. And when I was very, very small in Russia, despite the enormous anti-Semitism, they put me when I was really small as a main character in kind of a New Year's show, which was their replacement for Christmas. So that's its own thing. So it's kind of like the pull towards the stage and towards creativity was very consistent. But then it all kind of died out in Canada. I went through an extremely dark period as a teenager, where it was just kind of like no creativity, no nothing for many, many, many years. And I actually got back into music when I was doing my PhD, when I could kind of afford to do it on my own. And I bought a piano in my late 20s as well. And I relearned how to play. So it's been a ride.
Has it ever? If you can recall, Can you describe the first time you were mesmerized by a technology?
I remember I was talking to my dad. I was in grade 9 or 10. I think I was in grade 10. And I said, I'm trying to figure out what to do for a living. And he said, you should be a programmer like me. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe. And I remember learning how to code, just super hello world style programming,
Sure.
like super basic. And I remember being really amazed that the computer would do what I'm asking to do if I ask properly, if I understand well enough what I'm looking for. And that felt really magical at the time. And that's what initially when I went to computer science.
Wonderful. You briefly touched on this. I'd love to come back and double click. So mid PhD, I believe, you decided for fun to take opera lessons. Is that right? And you fell in love. Describe that situation and what were the highs and lows of the learning curve for opera.
So my husband actually took voice lessons first, and he was really enthralled by it. And I was like, I want to take voice lessons too. So I went to the same teacher. And we had a kid. We had a small child at the time. I think Alex was 2 or 3 years old, maybe even less. And I'm doing a PhD. I'm like, oh, I think I can make time to learn how to sing. And I used to sing. I sang in Israeli national television as a little girl, right? But it was a very dormant skill. It's something I haven't practiced in well over a decade. And I came and I remember singing a song for my teacher, one of the most wonderful, kindest human beings I've ever met. And I remember she said, all she could find in her kind heart to say was, I know it's hard to sing in front of people. I was really bad. I was really, really bad. And I sort of restarted singing. But I learned with her help. And I got really good within about 9 months. And I practiced a lot. I practiced over an hour a day. And within about 9 months, I started singing semi-professionally. People were willing to pay me to sing. Yeah, I don't get discouraged when I'm bad at first.
Yeah, I actually read, I think it was an interview with Medium. It took you 3 years to write music you were proud of. Was it that love that kept you going? And did temporary failure there teach you anything in research, in business, any of your many endeavors?
I think I generally don't mind being bad at stuff. Like, I think that's what makes me maybe a little bit unusual. I'm okay to not be good at things for a long time.
Excellent.
In part because I have real faith that I'm going to get better, because I always do. But in part because the experience of being bad at something is not very painful for me. I don't know how to explain it very well. I almost enjoy it a little bit when I draw a painting and I think it's awful. There is something about it maybe that shows me that I have room to grow, right? There is something humbling about it, which at this point in my career is important.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be bad at something. It balances things out in my brain. Yeah, I don't know. It's never been discouraging for me when I'm bad at something. And I don't start off good at stuff. I don't, at almost anything. I did as a kid when I was very young. It was easier, but compared to other kids, right? But when I start something now, I don't compare myself to children. I compare myself to adults who've been doing it for decades. And so, when at, 20s, I was about 25 or 26 when I started my business. 35 or 36. And so I wasn't a good businesswoman compared to somebody who's been doing it for a decade or decade and a half, right? So I needed that time to get better. But if you persist, you persist for a few years. It's amazing how much you can learn.
You wear many hats, Maya. You are a scientist, performer, author, educator, founder, CEO. Most people who are serious about one of those things quietly sacrifice most, if not all, the others. What have you given up, and do you regret it?
Oh, I wish I had more kids. It's really simple. I wish I'd had like 3 or 4 children. So it's always a sacrifice. I remember it was in my early 30s, and I met up with a woman who were doing some work around Holocaust awareness. And she said, Maya, you do everything. How do you do it? I take care of a house and whatnot and this and that. I'm like, I'm not a good housekeeper. Like, what are you talking about? I have like obvious, big, glaring things that I don't prioritize. Which, so it's okay sometimes when we can hire help, but, we ran a business for a long time where we couldn't afford to hire help in the beginning, when things were financially tight. And I make no pretense to be good at everything. I'm good at the things I devote time to. And there's a lot of stuff that falls by the sideways, which, by the way, one of the things that I'm trying to work on now, kind of past midlife, is like, what matters to me. So I fly to Toronto more often. I see my father. I sort of, some of the most meaningful things are never going to give you any glory,
Yeah. So here now, Maya, you live in San Francisco, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so the nucleus of this AI revolution, when you feel drained instead of energized there, what's likely to have happened?
Oh, it's hard to live in San Francisco. Oh my goodness. This has been such an honest interview. I mean, as well. It's so overstimulating. I travel a lot in part to be in less stimulating environments.
Did you feel obligated to move there then, if I may ask?
Yeah, we moved here largely for my husband's work.
Okay.
Right. It's been probably like the past 6 months here has been one of the steepest growth moments of my entire life. To try to understand my relationship with big cities, to try to see what works, what doesn't work, and why. I wouldn't switch it for anything, but it has not been simple at all. I think sometimes the things that we don't choose entirely, you need those challenging kind of like battle moments, kind of like reminding me, like, I feel like being here reminds me a little bit of that moment before I ran into Harold Cohen, where, you kind of, anything I've ever accomplished hasn't been because, of a smooth, nice boat ride with nice weather. It's that tension, that search, that discomfort that leads us to interesting places. Which, by the way, reminds me, I also wish I had studied more psychology. I wish I'd done art. I wish I'd done music professionally. There's like a million versions of me that I didn't get to do.
Well, Maya, we're about to put the car in park here. It's been a delight. We like to end with a bit of a lightning round, if you will. Short answers are completely fine and even recommended. Sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Rate the movie Her on a 1 to 10 scale.
10.
Will someone marry an AI by 2030?
It has already happened.
A marriage?
Yeah.
That was really loud. I apologize. An actual certified marriage. Where is this? Do you know?
Sorry. I probably have to look it up, but at least in some form.
Oh, it's okay. No. Well, then people can validate. Tremendous. Which prominent AI figure, dead or alive, would be your pick for a cross-country road trip partner?
Oh, God. Harold Cohen or David Koch for sure. Oh, my God.
David Koch?
David Koch, yeah, the one who made Amy Experiments in Music.
Okay.
I never got to meet him. It's a massive regret.
Circling back to the criteria in your book, novelty plus value for creativity. So off that, who's the greatest creative to ever live?
Oh, I mean, Leonardo da Vinci is supposed to be. He embodies creativity in so many forms.
He did a lot. Do you say please and thank you to LLMs?
Yes.
Maya, what's the most underrated song ever? It can be popular, but it's truly great, like an all-timer that still doesn't get enough love.
Okay, honestly, there is a song called Taurus made by Experiments in Musical Intelligence. It's in the style of Vivaldi, and it's an AI-generated song that's like super, super old. I love it.
How old are we talking? It's called Taurus?
It's Taurus. It's from, David Koch created it with a system he called Emily Howell. And I always show it to students, and this is like old generated works. The composition, not the sound, the composition was created with AI. The AI is called Emily. And it's phenomenal.
Can't wait. Maya, what could you give a TED Talk on that has nothing to do with what we've covered today?
How to give an enthralling talk.
Wow, you answered so quickly. Okay, public speaking, and yeah, you are seasoned in that regard. Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Will AI lead to universal basic income by 2030?
In some countries.
In some juicy. Do we have free will?
Yeah.
Tremendous. I do have 3 more questions. I believe they're deeply relevant, but they are personal. Please forego answering if you'd like. Published in 2013, you wrote Running from Giants, The Holocaust Through the Eyes of a Child about your grandfather, please forgive me, Shrulek Ackerman, who survived the Holocaust after his entire immediate family was killed. What part of that experience for you, or aspect of your grandfather himself, most actively lives on in how you think and work today?
My grandfather went through so much, and he lived a happy life. I have to remind myself when I find myself struggling in different ways that I have it in my blood to survive difficult things and maintain joy.
Hate was rampant in your grandfather's time. It remains prevalent today. Does AI have the potential to reduce hate?
All I'm trying to do is try to reduce how much damage it causes. I think there's very complex, very persistent psychological reasons why people continue to hate, and AI is not going to solve it for us.
Last question, Maya. What are you most excited about for 2026?
Oh, I'm working on a new book that I've been trying to birth for a while now. Still figuring out. I'm in an interesting moment. I think I'm going to have some fun updates coming up.
Could not be more excited for them. Maya Ackerman, it's been a pleasure and honor. The creative machine, dare I say, is you. Keep it up, and thanks so much for being on the Recap Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing.
Take care.